just want to move on to talk about Ivan Toney right now, because obviously we'd seen his name linked with a few clubs. Arsenal was one of those, Mark. What's happening with this player?
You know, it's a strange one with Ivan Toney because Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United, you know, three of the biggest clubs in the Premier League, that they really need a striker, and he's available, and I think he's going to go for about £40 million. But nobody's really taking an interest now. You know, you've heard all sorts of things about Ivan Toney, that he can be quite a challenging character. He's obviously had the ban last season, which he's put behind him. I've heard the thing about him being a difficult character quite a bit. I'm not sure that, you know, I think clubs these days want every kind of, you know, I dotted and T crossed before they sign a player. And I think sometimes if a player is challenging, I think you have to take a chance. And I think maybe clubs these days aren't prepared to take a chance, certainly on a player that's 28, a big investment. But I don't think 28 is old. But I think Arsenal have looked at him, Chelsea have looked at him, United have looked at him, and for whatever reason felt that he doesn't quite fit the profile of players they want. Everybody seems to be going for younger players now. I mean, obviously Raheem Sterling kind of contradicts that, but, you know, he's a last-minute short-term option, like the guys have said. But Ivan Toney doesn't fit the bill for a lot of teams. And I think come September, October time, when teams start scoring goals, they might just regret letting Ivan Toney go to Saudi Arabia. But the clubs have looked at him. They don't fancy him. I was told last season that Erik ten Hag looked at him in his first season at United and felt that he didn't quite do enough work up front that he wanted. He wanted a more Erasmus Højlund type player that would buzz around the back four of the opposition and make life hard for defenders. But Toney scores more goals and can take a penalty. So I just think it's choices, and I think a lot of managers and coaches have decided it's not for them.
Yeah, and do you think Premier League clubs might have missed out on a goal scorer here in Ivan Toney?
But I guess what we do know about the recruitment process now at clubs, it's very professional, and I say quote professional. And I'm with Mark, sometimes you have to take a chance, fair enough. But you will sit down, you will do all your calculation, you have to do that about the financial rules, you have to do it with your squad, the broader squad, how can we get one of the star players to rest, and so on. So I think that, I don't agree with Xhaka, but I see where he's coming from in terms of Sterling. They will think that Sterling will fit in because he can come straight into the dressing room, and from day one, he can contribute in a way that is good for Arsenal Football Club. And Ivan Toney, and Mark is describing it well, that's more a risk. And then they will put pluses and minuses, and they will see what are we going to do at this stage of the season. Early in the season, yes, but they have still managed to be so close to Manchester City last season without a striker. I feel that Arsenal, and I've said it many, many times, that number 9 lacks them. Because if you compare the two teams, they got Haaland, they got no one, they share the goals. But I think that with Ivan Toney, the clubs have had more than enough time to see if he fits there. He's 28. Difficult character. I mean, difficult character can win you a championship. Ask Manchester United when they got Eric Cantona from Leeds United like 400 years ago. I mean, that changed the whole football club. I'm not saying Toney is there, but I think today the recruitment processes, the recruitment departments are so big. So there are reasons why Manchester United, Chelsea and Arsenal have not got Toney.
It's not the goals, is it?
It's not.
No.
It's not. So now you're looking at managers shy away from a problem. I'm not suggesting he is, but Mark knows more than me, and there's been some rumours. There's obviously been factual stuff like the suspension for gambling, but he scores goals. And back in the day, managers, and Jan mentioned it, like Fergie and others, would handle problematic players. Not always, but quite often they'd take them in as long as they could do a job. But now you've got a bunch of eyes and ears. It's not one guy making the decision. It's not one guy saying, I'll take the problem on. It's maybe 3 or 4, and maybe even more than that, chipping away in the background. He does this, he doesn't do this, he's late for training, he does that, he doesn't do that, blah, blah, blah. And clearly they've all had a look at him, and they don't want what they perceive as a guy who's not going to give them enough for being a possible problem. And what's that going to result potentially in an Ivan Toney going into a backwater? And he could score 50 goals in Saudi Arabia. Nobody gives a toss. And it's a shame. Yes, from a point of view, he's going to make a lot of money if he goes. That's fine. But you're taking yourself to the football wilderness. And that, in some sense, is disappointing. But they've had plenty of time to look at this player, and nobody's taking the bait.
The thing that's kind of concerning for me here is I'm with the boys, and I think everybody's saying from a footballing sense, this doesn't make an awful lot of sense. But when you have three clubs of Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, all desperately needing strikers, probably the first two more so than any of the others, and none of them willing to take that chance, that becomes a concern, because we're not just talking about if Arsenal don't take a chance on Ivan Toney because they feel he's not the striker that will deliver us the Premier League, that's one thing. But we're talking about Chelsea and Manchester United also in that equation. Two clubs finished, 7th and 8th or whatever it was last season. If Ivan Toney doesn't fit the bill for them from a footballing perspective, it says to me that there's a whole lot more going on. And maybe I would like to think that managers or clubs are still willing to take on that risk, that difficult personality, if it means goals, if it means points. The fact that they don't just suggests that there's a whole lot going on that, Sydney, I'm not aware of.
So why wouldn't other clubs in Europe? I mean, for example, Napoli have just coveted Romelu Lukaku again. I mean, come on. Come on. Romelu Lukaku is pretty much a spent force.
But at least you've seen what Lukaku can do in Italian football.
And Conte wants him badly.
And they have that relationship. So, I mean, I understand your point.
I know, but we're on the History Channel here. It's what did you do for me at Inter Milan 3 years ago?
One of the biggest stories this summer has been the future, Mark, of Victor Osimhen. What's going on here? What's going to happen with this player?
It looks like he's going to stay at Napoli. I mean, we've got 15 minutes now, and it looks like that Napoli have decided that they haven't got a buyer, because I think there's an escape clause over 100 million euros, which is too much for clubs this summer to spend on a striker, even Chelsea, who spend that kind of money every week. And I think the loan deal wasn't an option, and Saudi Arabia just didn't appeal to Victor Osimhen. He just didn't want to go. So, credit to him for saying, no, I'm not going to Saudi Arabia. I think we had a similar situation with Raheem Sterling at Chelsea a couple of weeks ago. Saudi was on the table, but didn't fancy it. So Osimhen doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia. I think ideally he'd go to the Premier League and go to Chelsea, but they just looked at the numbers and it couldn't be done. Napoli weren't prepared to do a loan deal which didn't involve Chelsea paying a big part of his wages and a big loan fee. So the numbers don't stack up. So the reality now is that Osimhen's going to have to stay at Napoli for the next, 4 or 5 months until January. And if he's not going to play, he's not going to play. It's probably 4 months till January. That's just like having a hamstring problem or an injury that misses half a season. So it's not the biggest blow in the world. So he'll get a move in January, I guess, unless he can persuade Antonio Conte that he's a better option than Romelu Lukaku, and that is very possible because, as the guys are saying, Lukaku's probably had better days in the past, and it might work out that Osimhen stays and turns it around.
Dare I even ask you?
No.
Yeah, go on.
Dare I even
Please,
ask you
dear.
about Victor
Please,
Osimhen
dear.
for what, the 4th day running of whether Chelsea should have really pushed harder to get this player in?
No, you were right. Your initial instincts were absolutely spot on. I am all Victor Osimhen
I've enjoyed
out.
it. I've enjoyed the question.
I did almost duck when I asked, so you know what I'll do? I'll ask Jan instead. Jan, same question to you. I dare ask you it.
Well, first of all, Osimhen being linked to Chelsea is like this Schneider to Manchester United. Remember, he was linked for like 30 years and never ending up at Manchester United, by the way. And Mark is saying, I mean, there are two words that don't come together, saying that Chelsea can't afford a player. I've never heard of that. And secondly, that Chelsea hasn't got a striker. They've spent all the kind of money. They're starting it today again. We'll probably talk about Sancho later. And they still can't manage to get a striker in. There are people that say, well, Jackson will do it for them. I like Jackson, but there's no way he's going to do it for them. But Osimhen, this is like one of those ongoing stories that go on forever. I hope to see him here in the Premier League. I hope to see him at Chelsea or Arsenal or whatever, but it doesn't seem to happen. And now we're sitting here discussing, is Osimhen better than Lukaku? That is History Channel, Craig. I'm with you there.
So, Jan, you didn't even have Chelsea in your top 6 when it came to your predictions. If Osimhen had have landed there, would that have changed your predictions for the coming season?
Well, I mean, it would have helped to get one of the best strikers the last 3-4 years. We've seen that before. But there are many clubs now with Manchester United, Arsenal, and Chelsea looking for a striker, and they still can't manage to get Osimhen. So to your question, of course, if they got a striker in there, they got enough players, at least they got enough players in quantity, but they also now slowly got a lot of quality there as well. Maresca just got to learn how many players he got that he can use. So with a striker, I think absolutely they could burst into top 6.